Hey folks, Lindsay Huddleston with Sports Psychology Solutions back in the building for another episode of the SPS show with my able-bodied co-host and SPS intern, Mr. Terry McCord Jr. over there representing. How you doing? And
I'm
also we
good.
have our great director and engineer holding it down in Detroit right now, my good friend, Coach Orlando Watkins. We call him Houston because when we're out here in space, he's back home keeping everything in order for us, and we really appreciate it. Terry, man, what an exciting show we have today. I want to thank you for your producing work you've been doing, give you your credit and putting together a great show. It kind of builds upon some things we've been talking about, but I guess the word is social justice in sports, and particularly Michigan State football. And we'll talk about that a little later. But Terry, how did the boos sound at the Thursday night football game? Were like boo? Was it like a boo, boo, or just how were they booing in the NFL football? How do you think the boos sound?
It was almost like, you know how the opposing team comes out on the field and the fans are like boo, showing their jeers and stuff for the other team. But I saw a bunch of hypocrites in a way, because it was like, this is a way, football is a way for athletes to come together. And I think it's the ultimate sport that brings people together. It's the ultimate teamwork game where people come together and make things work. I mean, you need everybody. So I think just to see the two teams that were battling out week one, first game of the year, took a stance, stood in the middle of the field, and just the locked arms, and represented unity. I thought that was very powerful, to show, this is a way for them to peacefully protest. And I hear a lot of things of people saying, well, the riots and stuff that's been going on, it's like, well, why don't you guys do something peaceful? And then now they do something peaceful. It's like, oh man, don't do that in sports. Athletes, don't do that here. This is where we escape. But it's like, man, football is the ultimate unified game where people come together and really talk about, this is where people come together and make things work, like I said before. And it's just kind of sad to see people that are upset that, these grown men are taking initiative in this through this fight through social injustice to make their voices heard, as no this time not their voices heard, just showing it by action. So I thought it was very deep.
Terry, I've been sitting here because I'm almost stunned and I can't even get past the first word you used to describe it. You're a very intelligent person, so by you saying the word hypocrite, that doesn't mean anything to me, but the disgust you had when you said it. I know you, I've been knowing you a little while, but that's the part that people don't get, but that translated with me. You said a bunch of hypocrites. And Terry, you're a nice young man. And to get you to have to say that, I thought you was about to spit on the ground. But I understand what you're saying. And Terry, as a young man, and me being a little bit senior than you, but still a young man in this world, as well as Orlando as well, you try to figure things out, but it's like, well, what do you want? You're absolutely right when you said that.
Right.
I talked about this before when President Trump, early on, before we even got to the real social justice campaign, called the kneeling players sons of bitches. So just it's the president of the free world, the most powerful country in the world that is saying that. So you're right. But then, Terry, if we can bring those bulls, I guess, a little closer to home for some, and we'll talk about that in a second. We look at the NBA bubble to go from NFL, I think a good transition to the NBA bubble. We see the Toronto Raptors, defending world champions, get knocked out, minus Kawhi Leonard. That's another conversation, another whole discussion. But then you hear this awful petition, or these several petitions and GoFundMes, if you will, going around the Canadian country and these provinces that you described. And we're going to say some names. And we are not saying that these are the places that this information originated from. We're not saying that. However, we are saying with the hard work that Orlando Watkins has been doing with Michigan AAU and being able to help us grow our platform, we've had significant reach to Canada, to some places like where, Terry? Quebec,
Right.
British Columbia, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Alberta. You want to say a few of them that we've touched too, Terry?
This one I struggle to. It's Nunavut.
I left you with the hard one, huh?
With that one.
I didn't mean to, but no. But where else? What's some other places we touched? There's another one that's out there too.
I think Nova
Nova Scotia.
Scott,
I mean,
yeah, Scotia.
so,
Yep.
so here's what we're saying. Shout out to these Canadian provinces. If you're hearing the reach of the SPS Edge show,
Right.
and if our analytics are correct, which I feel they are, and there's some touch, give us some feedback. Is this the thought process of these Canadians whose first love had been hockey, who actually African Americans were involved in the earlier stage of hockey in Canada, which is another conversation. But what it tells me, it could either be 1,000 people or 10,000. Now, what I mean by that, Terry, I learned this lesson a long time ago in politics back in my early life when I was with Governor Jennifer Granholm on her campaign. And there was a huge radio show, the Mildred Gaddis Show, if you will, in Detroit. I'm sure Orlando knows about the Mildred Gaddis Show. He was all politically active and engaged. But I'll never forget I see the thumbs up. I'll never forget that our campaign manager at the time said, we got to get her down to this show. He said, because you don't know if it's 1,000 people listening or 10,000. So I always think about that concept, Terry, and as it relates to, my love for Canada. Let me talk about that personally. When I traveled as a motivational speaker, I traveled through the United States as well as Canada, and I love being in Canada. I got some stories offline I'll tell you that are appropriate, Terry, but I'll still wait till we're offline. I'll tell you those stories, all right? But my point being is, why I loved it? Because I felt that race was not an issue. Now, was there some negativity to me at that time in my mid to early 20s or whatnot? Was I naive to certain things? But I just know when I got on stage in Arkansas, literally compared to when I got on stage in Toronto, I know how I felt as a speaker. I know how I felt and how well received I felt. So with that, I always carried this notion. So you can have people who are nationalists or people who are basically racist and bigoted in all these different fashions. But I will say this, and I want to get your opinion, Terry. Is this what happens when you get a country that becomes a world basketball champion basically overnight compared to, teams that have been in cities for decades and decades and decades, if you will, and they just have a greater appreciation? Could you imagine in the NFL or any NBA teams in America where if a player you don't hear people telling Paul George to go back somewhere.
Right.
I mean, they talking about him. That's another conversation. But is that a fair comparison to make when you talk about that? And you add the fact, poor Siakam, he's a Robin. He's a Scottie Pippen. He's not a Kawhi. Kawhi Leonard left, and you guys still had a notion, we still can win a world championship. But when you don't, you dare have members of your country making racist statements about the man that you just held in high regard just a season ago, Terry. A season ago. So which is as offensive? We can talk about here as I wear this American flag on my USA basketball polo that I'm proud of, that I earned by being part of the USA basketball family, traveling the country, speaking with them about the issues we talk about, and also being a former Marine, having served. My brother served in the Navy. My dad served in the Army. My whole hood in Detroit all served. So the patriotism is no question. But is this something where racism, Terry, isn't even about the country that you're in? Because here in America, we have people saying these things, protesting, people peacefully protesting. But then in Canada, a place that I thought would be a bastion of less racial tension, you still have these things. So are we talking about race and racism as something that's universal? I don't mean to sound ignorant, but it doesn't matter what country you're in, you're going to have it. Or these two different type of scenarios, you think?
I don't think so. I think it's all the same. I think it has to be race rooted, because I mean, it's like it'd be different if they were saying, "Oh man, like GoFundMe to pay out his contract and send him to, the Hornets or the Grizzlies or a different team that's like not top
you don't
tier."
even want to in the NBA no more. You're out. Period. Oh.
It's just, I mean, it's crazy to think that someone who they had such a high regard for, I mean, the man is only 26 years old. So I think it's very crazy that they're speaking so poorly of him. I mean, I've seen, reports of them calling him a gorilla and sending him back to, the Congo where he's from.
Cameroon. Yeah.
Cameroon? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's wild, man, just to see someone who just helped, Kawhi Leonard win a championship just last season and had a pretty good regular season. He was second team All NBA, and now it's like, send him out of here, get him out of here. I mean, every athlete struggles. I mean, you're talking about a 26-year-old young man who is still learning more about himself and still learning. Yeah, he's a professional. He gets paid millions, but people still struggle. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about a human being. I mean, a mistake is, natural to humans. So I think it's very
Hey,
crazy to.
Terry, I want you to keep this going. I want to just throw this out here.
Okay.
I just thought about some Dallas Mavericks and Luka Doncic. Luka
Oh
went
yeah.
out early. I didn't see no GoFundMe talking about sending him back to where he's from. Is that a similar? Now they weren't just world champions, but Luka had was coming off a great rookie campaign. He was all
Right.
the talk. He had that real good run, but you don't hear anything of that. I mean, is that a fair comparison?
A little bit. I mean, Luka. To be fair, Luka did play better than Siakam did.
Okay,
I think at times
but he
Luka
lost though.
struggled.
He lost.
Yeah,
You still went
that's
home.
true. I think they were more not defending them at all. I think it was terrible, but I feel like they were more hinting towards how bad he struggled and didn't contribute the way he usually does. But there's no excuse to bring someone down like that and talk about sending them out. I mean, of all places, y'all, that's what just makes me think that race is involved. I mean, you're talking about sending him back to the Cameroon. It's like, what does that have to do with him playing bad? I mean, we're talking about a guy who has won a championship in the conversation for most improved player. I'm not sure if he's won yet. I don't want to misquote, but I mean, we're talking about a guy who's a
I
growing
think that was
star.
Brandon. That was Brandon Jennings. Not Brandon Jennings. Excuse me. Brandon Ingram that got most improved. I believe.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. If
So
I'm
I know he was in contention for it. So we're talking about
right.
a rising star in this league. His first year. Because I mean, I would argue and say that Siakam was that number one guy on this team now, but I don't think he's ready for that role yet. I think give him 2-3 years as he develops the game, gets a better jump shot, learns more game time situation plays where he is a number one guy and he has to make decisions. Granted, he has Kyle Lowry, who's someone who's a great point guard to help him out.
And Kyle Lowry got a pass. I don't know if that was his numbers allowed that to happen, but
I think so.
yeah, his
Yeah.
numbers. But who was it? I forget the young man's name who hit the big three to even keep them in the series to begin
Oh,
with.
I
At the end of the first game was second game,
think
right?
it was Norman Powell. He had a really great series, and
Right.
I think a lot of those like players that technically were built around Siakam this year played a lot better than he did, and so it didn't really look too good. But I mean, he's still young. I mean, this is his first season where due to Kawhi leaving, he's like
The
kind of
Finals
forced down.
MVP left. The Finals MVP. Am I right? Come on,
Right?
like a
Yep.
significant part of not just the team but the NBA. Oh, I'm leaving, and you still
Right.
think you go just go ahead and get a chip with no problem.
And he had a great year. He had a great regular season and just fell short. You know what I mean? So I think it's just crazy to think that Toronto, which I've been there before with my family and I loved it there. And it's just like to think that they're, critiquing him so hard to the point where it's like kind of racially motivated at the end where they're talking about these different, so-called jokes. And it's like, man, it's not funny whenever it seems like race is being involved in it. I mean, when you're talking about names like gorilla and these very derogative terms to where it's like that hurts people's feelings. I mean, words hurt. And we're talking about a guy who's trying to receive support from his team. You know what I'm saying? Like for example, you see the Lions Swift had a drop pass to win the game against the Bears last Sunday, and the Lions fans are going off on him and stuff like that. And you see players responding like, "Hey, he's a young player, let's pick him up. We're his fan base. We're supposed to love our team, ride or die." And I thought Toronto would be one of those teams where it's like, they're Canada's team. So it's like
No,
you guys are treating. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's like you would think that
But
like
I will go back to the point of
crazy,
early, whether it's 1,000 or 10,000 voices. But
right?
what I have not heard, and maybe I just have to look a little bit harder, is where's the national outcry detesting those statements? Downplaying those statements.
Right.
Saying that is wrong what they said. And saying we won't stand for this. You don't hear that. I haven't heard it.
No, I haven't.
That's not as big as a news story. So the Canadian country, as far as I'm concerned, is complicit, just like the United States is, in the oppression of Black people. And that's the conclusion I've come to here. Now, I may enjoy traveling to Toronto and Canada, but it's almost like, and I'm not trying to be out of term on this show today, but I'm trying to keep it authentic. I almost rather they talk about his mama, Terry. I don't want you to talk about
For
my mama.
real.
I don't talk about your mom, but you almost can talk about his mother
So
before
many
you talk
different
about his
ways.
race. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? I mean,
Yeah.
dirty, low is low, but it just shows you that it's almost like you kind of touched on it earlier, Terry, and I appreciate it, that it comes back to race, but it's such an easy reach. Oh, you're going to talk about him being dark complected, and you're going to talk about him being from Africa. Well, that's just a given. That's who he is. It's like, where is the comedian, a lot of comedians, some large comedians say they love it when people try to say fat jokes. He said, that's easy.
Right.
People call me fat all the time. That don't bother me. But it's just sad that during this time throughout America where there is this, what happened to the George Floyd movement? I don't want to sound naive again. What happened to that, to the power that I thought we saw in that translated to Black Lives Matter? And I believe, to get a little political, that Black Lives Matter has been infiltrated. And you know what? And I don't even want to say it like that. The message has been co-opted. The Black Lives Matter, because guess what? Now in America, if you say Black Lives Matter, people say, oh, no, they don't. Wait a minute. They have all this vitriol they can spit about 3 words, but what they don't get or what they don't want to accept, Terry, and tell me what you think, it was only to be a reference that my life has value as a person. Black Lives Matter. When Black people say, yeah, Black Lives Matter, well, my life values, but they have connected it to this global political thing, Antifa, a left-wing force that fights back, that is violent, that meets the violence that people are experiencing through police brutality, and they fight back, and people are pushing that. So now you can't even say Black Lives Matter. I even saw something that said that a recent a soccer league, I'm not sure where, is removing a Black Lives Matter badge or patch, if you will, off a uniform. Okay, but it doesn't mean you have the right to say and believe that Black lives do not matter. Regardless of what political, or this a terrorist organization, they go after that quick, but I don't want to keep going on. What do you think? What can you take away from that, Terry?
I think, just having, like what you said, talking about that African American people of color lives matter. And now you see African Americans coming together and making a group talking about that our lives personally make them matter. So I think I've heard, a lot of terms where people have been calling them, communists. And, it's just crazy because it's like people don't actually know the true definition of communism. And it shows when they call that, when they're opposing how things are going and talking about reforming, the justice system and making it to where it is actually fair for everyone. You're hearing people like, oh, commies, you guys want to.
It shouldn't be fair for
cause
everybody.
chaos, it's just like, and I'm like a friend of mine, Henrik Jones talked about at work, and he talked about this guy was talking about, what more do they want? I mean, they're in the NBA, they're in music, what more do they possibly want? And it's like, man, we're just trying to get the same opportunities that, you may have. There's people that wouldn't even dream about having that opportunity because of how, economic injustice, and not being able to see those different things where there's education reform that needs to be done. So, I mean, it's a lot of terms, and I think a lot of that is powered from Black Lives Matter because you see a lot of people of color that are in these areas that feel that way. So I think a lot of that is powered by it. So it does kind of have like a code, like you said, like code definition with it, next to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, I think it's kind of vital that we use it that way. But I also don't like, when people tend to have a definition of what they think of something is, but then they keep it that way, instead of people coming out. People have been coming out and talking about like, look, that's not what that means. This is what it means. We're not a communist group. These are different, what we stand for, as a group, saying that my life matters, which is pretty much says it in the name. But I just don't appreciate, how people are keeping these very biased, beliefs of a group that's just trying to uplift people that have been, pushed so far down for, 400 years. So, I mean, I think it's just crazy to think that, people would just keep these beliefs and not even be willing to hear about what they actually mean.
No. Groupthink is amazing. You said some great things I want to touch on. One thing I was thinking about, and this is random, but it goes to my point. What color is the sky? The sky is blue, right?
Right.
So if you and I, the two of us, even Orlando, and I know he's always listening, three of us say, you know what, man, yeah, the sky is blue. But somehow 50 to 100 people show up. And as we all sit around, social distancing, of course, they say, you know what, the sky is red. 97 people said that the sky was red. So I'm going to ask you again, Terry, what color is the sky?
Blue.
It's blue. You say it's blue, but the mass and the majority say it's red. So there may be some question as it relates to the group and whatever construct that you're in right now, because that collective group may have a red sky approach. So despite you saying the sky is blue, it's always been blue, I'm looking at it, it's blue, you all just decided that it's red. So now we have conflict. And I know that was a simple way to put it out there, but I think that's the basics of it. Some things you were saying earlier in your remarks, Terry, made me think back, and I'll go back to my comment about the George Floyd movement. When you saw this movement, you know, going across the world, becoming a global movement for social justice, made me think that, there's a lot of quietness out here. Yeah, we hearing people organize, I said, but there's a lot of folks being quiet. Because you know what I think they were doing? They were saying, how we go play this? What are going to be our talking points? What is going to be our common understanding? And you know what their common understanding was? Sky is red. No,
Right.
Sky is blue. Because Black lives matter. No, all lives matter. So the sky is red. So now, despite us having our own reality that we live, that we breathe, I mean, going back to your last point too that you made about people saying, referencing Henry's conversation he had with someone, what do these athletes want? They're rich. You saw LeBron. Do you see LeBron James' hotel suite that looked like an apartment?
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
You know, they're rich. They're affluent.
Right.
But guess what? And maybe this is the disconnect between the races and the culture. They still feel for people who are struggling. Black people who are rich feel for Black people who are not. Black people who are successful feel for Black people who are not. They're related to them. They're connected. Exactly. They're probably the only one in their circle and their family that is as successful as they are.
Right.
My goodness, but you know what? As much as it may unfold and unlock for me, Terry, at my age, and my experience, my education, just like you as a bright young man, it unlocks for you. Same thing for Coach Orlando Watkins, it unlocks for him. It really doesn't matter what our reality unlocks to, because there's another group dynamic out there. And the way you move the needle with them or apply pressure is economically. And we're going to talk about that point a little later when we get into some things. We talk about Michigan State, and I want to talk about this a little bit later. You kind of touched on it. I'll remind you of it. But that's the only way I know there can be a way to make things happen. Because I think back to the Montgomery Boyce boycott and that year or so of not taking public transportation and the financial impact it had that made the powers that be and the racist South say, oh, okay, we'll do something. And what do we see this happen at? We saw it happen with the NFL. We saw it happen with their fear, concern that if we're not politically correct and these sponsors get pressure, the sponsors will make us have to change our ways. And that is how you impact change. But that only happens that when we have a collective thought. And then, you know what? You know we got to thank for this? We better thank Donald Sterling. Now, why do y'all say that? Because when Donald Sterling made those remarks and upturned the apple cart in the NBA and put Chris Paul, Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron James in a room together and said, we got to do something, that was the impetus of where we are right now in 2020, where in the bubble, they said that the owners were like, when they were talking about leaving the bubble, the owners were like, well, we waiting on to see what LeBron gonna say. Now, we touched upon this last week. Michael Jordan is all powerful now because he was part of brokering that. But when Michael Jordan was in the finals, they weren't talking about we waiting to see what Michael Jordan gonna say.
Exactly.
These NBA owners recognize that power. What do you take from all that we've had in these last few moments, Terry?
I think that, that was key of what you were talking about the power of the players have today. I think a lot of it is because they're, willing to be genuine about how they feel. I mean, you see LeBron, Chris Paul, who's the president of the Players Association, being able to stay focused and battle those thoughts of what the NBA is going to do as players. That's hard to do in the playoffs, to focus on that and focus on the game. So I think it's very key that we acknowledge that these athletes are speaking up. And I think owners are starting to recognize how much of an influence, guys like LeBron, Carmelo, D Wade, even though Dwayne Wade's not playing anymore, but they still have a voice and an impact on the game and how people, are affected by these different changes in the league. So I think it's really cool to see that. I think, like you mentioned, Michael Jordan, I mean, there were times where he was described as, someone who didn't really care to make these kind of remarks
You know the
because
name
he
of
could.
his yacht? You know the name on the back of his yacht? His big
No, I don't
yacht? Mr. Terrible.
know.
So just take that into context. Like he wasn't an agreeable guy. I just want to add that. But please keep going.
Oh yeah, so I mean, just with that being said, Mr. Terrible, I mean, one of the quotes that sticks with me is like his remark about how what was going on at the time, and he was like, Republicans buy Jordans too, and we're talking about a guy who just that off that remark is more concerned about his character and more concerned about how he looks with other
Can
people.
I add some context to that statement, Terry? You're very
Always,
a historical reference. And there also was, prior to that, a U.S. Senate candidate in North Carolina, African-American Senate candidate, a Democratic candidate, that could have beat Senator Jesse Helms, longtime Republican senator, their conservative, racist senator. And they asked Michael to support him, and he wouldn't come out and publicly support him. So he was chastised for that too. He sent him a check, but he didn't win. That was after the fact. So it's ironic that Republicans buy my shoes too, not supporting the black, candidate at the time is the guy who's sitting at the table to broker the deal between the NBA owners and the NBA players, i.e. LeBron James and company, not leaving the bubble. So I want to add that context to that.
So yeah, I mean, just having him be able to speak on that, would you say that it kind of demonstrates, growth in him to be able to step in? Because I think the old Michael Jordan would have stepped out and would have just let things play out and not really
left. But here's the thing though. The funny thing is, two points I want to make, and these are all following off the things that you stated. You got a really good train of thought going here. Michael Jordan is looking at it. I'm an owner too, and wow, look at either what I did or what I did not do. And here I'm in a position as an owner, so I'm kind of like caught in between because I have my interest as an owner, and I could have been Mr. Republican buy my shoes and just did with the owners, but I stood in the gap. I stood in the gap between these players. And another point I wanted to make, and it wasn't until I talked to you on this podcast right now that I was reminded of it. Chris Paul and Carmelo Anthony played the season of their life. But think about it. They've been playing it under the pressure of being able to bring the bubble back together. Carmelo just got back in the league from being blackballed. Let's call it what it is. We saw him every day putting up shots of where he was at. He was out dealing with that stress. And Chris Paul was actually being more so the president of the Players Association than the point guard for OKC, even though he was carrying his team there. So just imagine if these guys were playing without the pressure of the social justice movement that they practically had to carry into the bubble to keep together. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I think, it's very important that we talk about that, talking about the term mental toughness. I mean, we're talking about guys that are making key decisions for a lot of people, whether it's, them possibly winning a championship that they've been working so hard for and making a stand for social justice. So I think it's I know it would be tough for me. And I think, guys, I believe that God puts people in those situations that can handle that. I think, Chris Paul has always been known as a great leader. I think he's probably one of the best leaders in basketball. And I think, just him being in that situation, I think we couldn't have had a better person that handled that. I mean, just seeing the league come back together and, still have their voices heard. And
they say it would not have happened without
decisions.
Chris Paul. Everyone attests that it would not have happened without Chris Paul.
Oh, yeah.
if Chris Paul wouldn't have done what he done, the bubble wouldn't have happened. And that's saying a lot.
It is.
When he first walked in, I believe maybe the Floridian or whatever hotel they were at, when he first walked into the bubble, they said he burst into tears because he said, wow, I didn't think this was going to happen, or I'm so grateful that it happened considering what they had to go through. Because I think it's easy for people to assume, oh, the NBA is going to play in the bubble or they're going to just go play. No, that was a project.
Oh, yeah.
They had to work some things out. They had to have some leadership in the NBA that the players could say, okay, we'll go with that. Because you got to think when that happened, Cap's like, man, I don't know. I don't want to do it. But this has become probably one of the better sports stories as far as how this can happen. So I wanted to add that about him. You know what I want to do, Terry? I'm looking at the time, and I think we're doing really good. I want to be mindful of the transition I do want to make that's consistent. And you kind of triggered that for me when you talked about the pressure these players are under. Because here it is, I got a job to do as a professional athlete in the NBA. I'm trying to win a championship, whether it's LeBron or whoever else is chasing the chip. But then you have these issues that are weighing on you. In the case of Chris Paul, the whole bubble was weighing on him, you know. Same with LeBron James, with the words that he had when all those people came together on that fateful night when the Milwaukee Bucks decided not to take the court. Today, I was on a call with Michigan State head coach Mel Tucker, the second African-American coach in the history of Michigan State University. It was very interesting to hear his comments on Black Lives Matter and meaning the social justice movement in that regard. And just yesterday, I was on the phone with other media members with Michigan State Athletic Director Bill Beekman. And the question that I posed to Bill Beekman is the same one that I posed to Michigan State head coach Mel Tucker. But before I get into that part, which will be our next thing to set up, I want to talk about a new experience that we're going to be taking part in. I'm really happy to say that. And that's the Streets Are Talking podcast network. And you and I have talked about this online. I've shared this information with our great coach, holding us down, Coach Watkins in Detroit. And what we're going to end up doing is we're going to be part of this great collective of other great artists and individuals. Their podcasts are going to include everything from Chicago house music to women talking about what women talk about when men are not around. So that may be something to look at as well. So it's going to be a collective, and that wouldn't happen without some great people. And one person I want to acknowledge, Terry, is Mr. Clarence Sumo Barbour III, my guy Sumo. Been knowing him for years. Shout out to my guy Demetrius Mehead Blackshear is my best friend who put me with Clarence years ago, but we went to high school together, yada, 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 back in Detroit. His guy is Don the Carman Houston out of Chicago. Don is well known throughout the country for his great work he does in getting people in cars, his radio show, Carman, but they brought their expertise together. And this show tonight will end up being the first show to air on the Streets Are Talking podcast network. So we'll be sending out a link on that real soon. But I really want to put that out because I want to say that our message is really being shared. And I want to be consistent and also talk about, you know, I feel so purpose-driven right now. And it's funny how things have come together with the work with the Streets is Talking, the work that we've been doing, the great work you've been doing. And wow, this social justice thing is upon us. You know, I got back into sports, Terry, to get away from the politics of race in America. I really did, man. Years ago, when I left politics and corporate, you know, and all that, and the lobbying and all the things I was doing, I did it to get away and hopefully get involved with the meritocracy of sports, the meritocracy, excuse me. But now race has found its way in. So in the words of Al Pacino, when he was in The Godfather, Don Corleone, he said, every time I try to get out, they pull me back in, but that's okay, because now I'm walking in my purpose. So what I want to talk about is first yesterday's call with Athletic Director Bill Beekman. He was announcing the Big Ten is back. And what better person than the Athletic Director of Michigan State's football program, an $85 million budget football program, to have this $30 million conversation, Terry, to talk about referring to the budget or what's at stake with Michigan State football this season, to talk about the 9-game season. So let's talk about Bill Beekman before we start talking about Coach Mel Tucker. You've been privy to the words and that was shared on the call. Terry, you're up to date. What was your take on the information I talked to you about regarding Bill Beekman coming on the call and talking to the media?
Okay, so first I just want to say, I'm really proud that he was able to speak on that, and I'm really proud that you asked him a very specific and direct question to about like
Let me
what
just say what the
Michigan
question
State's doing.
was for everyone,
Okay.
then I'll give the floor right back to you. My question to Bill Beekman was, and I quote, the NBA and the NFL are back on track, but the elephant in the room is social justice. What things are you doing to prepare, or what contingency plan do you have in the event that these players, namely Michigan State players, are having issues with social justice? Talk to us about that. And I'll go back to you, Terry, because that was the question I had.
Right. So I mean, just having that question being brought up, I think it's great. I think it puts them in perspective to really think about what they're doing
So to
and
your
how they're
point,
gonna do it.
and I'm being totally transparent, I don't feel that question was going to be brought up by any other member of the media. And I'm talking
Right.
about from the newspapers that you pay subscriptions to, the online, subscriptions that you get. All major media was included in that, and I just don't think that question was going to come up. But why was it important that it needed to come up, Terry?
So I think one thing that I wanted to point out, quoted from him, which is actually a quote from President John F. Kennedy, is to follow up good words with good deeds. And I think that was his main and key message of what they've been doing. I mean, he talked about starting the Diversity Leadership Coalition, a part of that, and being um, having that being brought up and started, talking about diversity in sports and let alone campus, and for them to be in search of a chief diversity officer, I think that's really cool to talk about how we're able to unify together and being able to accept new people, new ideas, new, because I mean we're not just talking about new people of color. We're talking about new ideas, new insights, new different things that are kind of coming together and
Let
being
me
able to
add one
unify.
thing to emphasize that point about the diversity inclusion officer. That is the only funded position that Michigan State will take on in this new budget because of the
Mm,
coronavirus. There are hiring freezes, so no one is getting hired. If somebody said they're about to get a job at Michigan State, I'm about to be this or that. It's not happening. There's a hiring freeze, with the exception of that one position. So you highlighted that
nice.
about that position, but I wanted to go back and emphasize that. But please carry on. You're doing great with what you're sharing.
So, kind of like a little itty bitty tips about what Coach Tucker was saying. He really focused on people wanting action. I mean, I think they was talking about how the players were tired of seeing statements and saying, "Well, oh, we're going to do this. We stand with them," and not seeing too much action. I think he was very transparent about what they're doing. He's encouraging his athletes to speak out. One thing that I do hope that he's going to keep the same attitude whenever his players receive criticism. I do hope that they continue to back them up when they do receive criticism. But we're talking about student advisory council being involved, being able to talk to students, and from every sport, not just
As a
football, and
student
being able to
leader
talk about
myself as well, but you more recent as a student leader, as a student athlete leader, you know the importance of those type of entities, those advisory
it. Oh
committees,
yeah,
things like that, because you've been involved in things like that.
I think it's key. I mean, you got to start with who's in your community. I mean, we're not just talking about football. We're talking about the whole Michigan State community. And my mom's a part of the community, and I think it's really cool to see that they're really working on seeing how students feel, not just the athletes, not just football players in this case, but just seeing how does everyone feel. And so, hearing how students feel and other students advocating for other students is very key. I mean, we're talking about now that that's the only hire that they're willing to do is the chief diversity officer. That's key. I mean, it's showing that they're willing to pay a person to be able to raise awareness about increasing their diversity, and bringing all these different ideas, people, different shades of people in together to kind of help Michigan State grow. Because I mean, just me walking on campus, I mean, the International Center there on campus, you see a lot of people, and I think it's really cool to see that they're bringing someone in to make everyone feel like MSU is their home. And I know I made MSU my home. Me going there in 2 years and my mom being there for a while, I think it's really cool to see that someone is taking that initiative to make others feel more at home instead of just having, I'm just blessed to have faculty and the family, but now it's very cool to see other people being brought into this and feeling like MSU is their home.
You make some excellent points, Terry. You really did. you captured it correctly, especially with the quote that Bill Beekman made of President John F. Kennedy. And when he was quoting it to me, I'm saying, this man is quoting Kennedy. Like, it's
JFK.
monumental. And then it was a quote that it wasn't a well-known quote. It was like a quote like, oh, were you familiar with that? So it speaks to that. Another point you made an excellent point that, the fact that they're highlighting that this is the only hire that they're making, it also holds them to be accountable for it. And Bill Beekman is not his first rodeo. People may say, oh, he doesn't have a long history as being an athletic director. But what people may not know about the current athletic director, Bill Beekman, is that he was once the MSU board secretary. Now, what does that mean? It's a very powerful, influential position because he's responsible for, basically he heard cats. And I say that with no disrespect to anyone who's in that position, but he's responsible for the trains running on time, connecting people, building coalitions. He was extremely excited, and that is the word he used when he described what's in store for MSU as it relates to social justice. And he talked about a book club. And I thought that was interesting because at first when I heard him say book club, I said, well, how impactful can a book club be? But I recognized two things. One, students are in college and they're going to be encouraged to read. So them reading is going to be at an all-time high because I'm sorry, you a college student, take that book. This may be the only book you read compared to other things you read for recreational reading, but that's a good thing. But also, it was another part of that. If you grow up in a community, and me being an author, I'll talk about the book later, but if you grow up in a community where you're not really pushed to read, and I think it's fair to say that may be some aspect of it, it may not have as much impact. But what it tells me is Bill Beekman's perspective is the power of books and reading. And that's a different way to be able to share messages. So I have to be able to understand that sometimes when someone outside of the community that I come from stresses an idea, even though I may not be that drawn to it, Terry, I realize this is the way for them to effectively communicate. So even though everyone may not be as excited to hear about a book club, it shows you that was a way that he could be potentially vulnerable. He can learn more. But I think it was something to be said about that. What I'll do, Terry, I'll transition to today's call. Today's call up with Coach Mel Tucker. A very powerful call. Well, one, I want to keep, my credibility intact. So I said, I'll make it easy. I'll just ask the same question that I asked of Athletic Director Bill Beekman to Mel Tucker, who happens to be, like I said earlier, the second African-American football coach at Michigan State. And I felt very good asking that, Terry, and I think you make a really good point. And we talked about the importance of the quote-unquote being in the room and being able to ask the question, to be able to set the tone, because I don't think had I not asked that question like I did 2 days straight, the two influences at Michigan State, the athletic director and the new football coach, it wouldn't be a discussion. And more importantly, it would not give them entree to be able to share that message. Yeah, they could say it in a statement. They could say it in a reactionary moment, but they wouldn't have had the opportunity to lean in it, as I put it, and talk about, both of them responded to my question for 3 minutes straight. Exactly 3 minutes. And I think that says a lot about someone responding. And also, too, at least definitely for Mel Tucker, it was his first time, from my understanding, to be able to speak about anything related to social justice. So he gave a great response. Some of the things Mel Tucker, just as athletic director Bill Beekman quoted John F. Kennedy, Mel Tucker's quote, Terry, remember that quote we looked at? You want to say what his quote was?
I think we're on the same page. I think I found the quote about the communication, education, and resources.
Yeah.
It was like the very first one. I mean, I liked how he made it very clear, crystal clear, like I like to say. That was the first thing he said, to my understanding.
He did say that. And another thing he said, that you can't lead a team if your players don't know where you stand. I'll repeat that. You can't lead a team if the players don't know where you stand. And even though everybody was muted, you could hear a pin drop. You heard that, because if you didn't know Coach Mel Tucker, and I won't, act as if I've known him for a long period of time, but we are familiar with each other. We are in communication with each other. We kind of, that brother's from Cleveland. I'm from Detroit, so with all due respect, he knows that I'm there with the best interests of Michigan State, those young people, and of course his success. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I'm a black man, and this man's a black coach, and I'm proud that he's there. And let's be real. The crazy part, Terry, is this. This would be considered somewhat of an uncomfortable, if not inappropriate conversation if it was not for the social justice issues taking place right now. Oh, what does it matter that he's a black coach? Well, it matters today. When we talk about systematic racism, when we talk about how African Americans and other minority communities are, disconnected from so many important resources, talk about health disparities, etc. So let's go back to something you said. Something else you took from Mel Tucker's statement when he talked about everything they're going to be doing, including the financial literacy. I know that piqued your interest when you mentioned that.
It did. I thought it was cool because, I mean, we know at the end of the day that economic freedom is like the ultimate power in society. And I think just teaching these athletes about, managing money and just talking about what to do when they get money and that next step. Because, I mean, right now, college players aren't able to earn any money or receive any endorsement money and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's very cool that they're preparing them for that, to being able to be authentic and real with these players about, hey, look, when you get this, it's important for you to do that. And so I think it's really cool to have players, to give them that access and that resource of how he put it to be able to learn about it.
Yeah, it's funny because when I heard him say it, it was almost like the word was bookended by two other terms. I said financial literacy. But I was like, wow, I mean, he's really going there. I guess, Terry, we're so used to hearing, I don't want to say BS, but you're so used to hearing things. But what you've done, say again?
I was say textbook answers.
Yeah.
Ones that, make everybody feel good. Yep.
Yeah, and to hear the statements that Bill Beekman is leading with, see, here's the thing. Yeah, a national championship, if Tom Izzo can get another one, that's quite possible, is a great thing. Yeah, a great football coach with success is a great thing. But this probably will be more Bill Beekman's legacy than anything else. Because the way he embraced the discussion as a white administrator who wasn't guarded, and it seemed like he was more in his comfort zone because, again, what do we talk about? He's a consensus builder. He's a coalition builder. He brings fractured groups together. He's the board secretary. Can you imagine going into a board meeting, the board of trustees at Michigan State, any other organization or corporation, and you're tasked with getting them to go in one direction? This is what he does. Right. So I really think the confidence you hear from him, and he being the leader of the athletic department saying that, followed up the next day by the African-American head coach. And yes, I will say African-American head coach. There's this push to remove descriptors. And when you do that, when you remove a descriptor of you being African-American or having a particular kind of experience, you devalue my experience in this world. So that whole I don't see color thing and why does it matter? Well, it does matter. The cities wouldn't be burning if it didn't matter. So the last thing I'll say about that, Terry, it was a great, great call to give you some information, to give our viewers some information by the time this is out shortly. They've been about 7 or 8 Zoom calls with players and their parents. So the MSU football staff have been very involved. Another thing, they said that they've been having open dialogue with not only just the coaches, Terry, but the players as well. And I was really impressed with that, along with Coach Tucker's statement is, it's important to lead a team that they know where you stand. But he said our coaches are in on it. And that really resonated with me. And I think that resonated with you too. You want to touch on that?
Yeah, it really did. Because, I mean, it's just to show, again, a new coach, we're talking about a new coach that's coming into a rough situation. I mean, we're talking about a coach that has to adapt someone else's recruits and players. That's one obstacle. We're talking about a pandemic, so he's not able to be around his team as much as he would like to, have them in his face, get to know them as much as he would like to at the time. And 3, we're talking about social injustice issues being brought up. So I think this is really key to see new coaches, like an entirely new, for the most part, new coaching staff, and seeing them be able to bond with the players. Because, I mean, everyone has their opinion about this. Everyone has, people are upset, players are upset. So I think it's really cool to hear that he's allowing and creating an area, a time frame where players, and having meetings where players and coaches can say how they feel and come together. And I think it's also showing that some of these African American teammates have allies, and teammates that,
Support was the word he
you know what I'm
used
saying?
that moved me. He said, I
Right.
want them to feel supported. And he stated
Exactly.
that, and Bill Beekman stated that. But more importantly, Coach Tucker continued to say, I want them to feel supported. I just want to add to that. Please keep going.
Oh yeah. So I mean, like again, like support system of not just the coaches but teammates. I know it's very important, to know that I have teammates that have my back. I mean, I have to go to war with these guys upcoming. That the season is supposedly starting up. These are guys I'm gonna have to go to war with. So just being able to be vulnerable as a team with the new coaching staff and all this stuff that's been going on, to be able to unify this way, I think is a really cool way, because we're also talking about improvements, social, like in society, being able to take those strides and get better with social injustice, but also bring a team together. And we're talking about uh, a team that has, all these different kinds of people coming together. Like, you have Caucasian males, African American males, people of color, minorities. You have Latino males, Asian males. Everyone coming together and to talk about these different problems. So I think it's very key to show that unification of a new coach and his players.
Yeah, man, because I can only imagine being in a locker room at a place where the coach, the athletic director, the university is not on board and is not about empowering you. And these
Right.
statements from Bill Beekman and Coach Mel Tucker put themselves out there to say, hey, call us on, hey, we're going to be about it. We're going to be on the right side of this. Is the direction we're going in. And I think that's great. In the interest of time, what I do want to do is that I do want to tell anyone who's watching, our new listeners, those who've been supporting us, Terry, I think you the eye candy for this show, man, because ever since you came on the show, man, we been getting like, the ratings been going up, man. They've been boosting up and everything. Terry, that's great, man. But you have a great following. I want to acknowledge the McCord Brain Trust, your dad, Terry, McCord, your mom, as well, and all the great things she's been doing. But that's been really helpful because their influence over you is being a part of what we have. And let me tell you something, man, and I'll be honest, man, I haven't felt this good in a very long time. And the reason I say that is because I'm bright enough to look and see what's going on in the world, Terry, and using today as an example or yesterday as an example, man, I couldn't in good faith be in those rooms or be on those calls and say college football is starting back, amid the global pandemic. NBA and NFL have their things. I could not have been on those calls and not made a statement or asked a question about social injustice. And I'm glad that with the energy that you bring, the energy that you have, we're able to do that. What I want to do before I'll let you give us some closing remarks, I want to do a little housekeeping. I want to put out there for the record the things that we're going to be looking forward to doing, the things that our viewers can look forward to seeing. We talked about the great partnership with the Streets of Talking podcast network, and that's something you'll be seeing some links on soon. But with the SPS brand and digital sports network, there's always the SPS Monday Motivation. There's the SPSEdge show, which people are taking a part in right now with Mr. Terry McCord as the co-host. The SPS Game of the Week. Looking forward to traveling the state of Michigan throughout this football season. May be able to get down to see both King and Cass play on Saturday. Look forward to being down there and giving you guys some information about that. Then, of course, talking about MSU, the SPS MSU pregame and postgame show, meaning before the game, being able to get you some information, whether we're on the field, we're on location, whether we're traveling somewhere in this regard, but also being able to give you interviews, not only the Mel Tuckers of the world, but the players. The hope is with a healthy society, Terry, that can transition over to basketball. So you'll have the SPS MSU basketball pre and post game show. And also want to shout out again, Coach Orlando Watkins and all the great things he's doing with AAU. You got the Michigan AAU that you can follow on social media, as well as the AAUhoops.com website you can go to and talk about the book. The SPSEdge, a guide to mental toughness in sports and life post-COVID-19. Got some great stories and experiences with coaches, general managers, and all these people I've been around the country with over the past few years to talk about mental toughness in sports and life. And lastly, Terry, a few more things. The subscribe to the SPSEdge. You can follow us on the YouTube channel at the SPSEdge. the Instagram, the SPS Edge, Twitter, the SPS Edge, as well as the website, TheSPSEdge.org. And that is .org because SPS is a nonprofit organization focused on increasing mental toughness and mental health amongst the next generation. But Terry, you got some hot fly, social media tags out there. You got to catch you at what? Terry McCord, Terry.McCord15 at Instagram. Let me make sure you get your handle straight. Get your handle out there.
Yeah, so I mean, just follow me, Terry.McCord15. It's the same on Twitter. I keep it very simple. 15 was my number growing up, so I keep it simple. Talk about the same stuff, sports, all kinds of things, different society issues, and even it's like funny jokes, stuff about college, just different stuff. I keep it real, authentic, appropriate. I keep it real on there, so give it a follow.
So what I want to do is I want to, again, thank Coach Orlando Watkins. We probably wouldn't be coming at you with this platform, with this information, with this content, if not for his great work. And you're very appreciated, Houston, always keeping us together. And Terry, I'll let you have the last word. All I want to say is tell our people to keep tuning in, keep supporting what we have. We'd love to get your feedback. The way it's making me feel, I think it's going to have a positive impact on other people in some way. So with that, Terry, I'll let you give us the last word before we sign off.
So just two quick things I just want to leave off with. So I think one would be Coach Tucker's quote, "Can't lead a team if they don't know where you stand." I think if you're at any point of leadership where because you're going to notice conflict. If you're at any point of leadership of a corporation, even if it's just a manager, like if you're a manager at your job, if I'm a part of like a study group leadership, anything. If you're a leader and you see these things going on about different stuff, social injustice, pandemic, different struggles, let people know where you stand. Let them know that I'm here for you. Show empathy. Like, I know how you feel. Let me step in your shoes. You know what I'm saying? This is where I'm coming from. So let me hear where you're coming from, and let's see where we can go. Let me be that helping hand to you. So I think we should follow the lead of Coach Tucker and really feel for others. You know what I'm saying? Be able to be that true leader, and lead people, show that influence, giving people the chance to feel that they're heard and, help being that helping hand. Another thing is just off of what the athletic director, Bill Beekman, said, just, going off of action. We're tired of seeing statements. You can post all you want on Instagram and all that and Twitter about how you feel, but I mean, it's about what you do daily. I mean, you don't have to be seen. No, you don't have to have a camera like LeBron and all these other guys have. You don't have to have a camera around you to be genuine. I think it's mostly important when you're genuine when the camera is off, because I think that's what really translates to the world. The camera's not on you 24/7. Make sure you keep that authenticity and be able to stay genuine and keep it going. Be who you are and keep this struggle. Keep pushing through this struggle and continue to take action.
Terry, amazing job, man. You give me energy. So for Mr. Terry McCord Jr., I am Lindsay Huddleston with Sports Psychology Solutions. This is the SPS Edge Show. I want to thank Coach Orlando Watkins. We want to see you guys next week, same time, 6 p.m. If not, you can catch us on YouTube or on social media. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you guys next time.